A third day of continuous bombing has decimated Gaza. Borders and exit points are closed, essentially trapping civilians in the Strip. Around 2.3 million people live in Gaza. Official reports show over 1,200 Israelis and nearly 2,000 Palestinians have been killed in the violence, including about 1,000 Hamas fighters. Over 200,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been internally displaced by the bombing. NBC reports that privately, President Biden quietly urged Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu to avoid more civilian casualties in Gaza. The administration is also seeking to establish a, quote, safe corridor for civilians to flee the area.
The humanitarian crisis in the Strip is only just beginning. Multiple outlets now report that the region's only power plant soon to run out of fuel. The World Health Organization has also confirmed that medical supplies in Gaza are completely exhausted.
What strikes me about that reporting is the idea that Biden is quietly saying to Netanyahu, can you please not kill civilians? But the kinds of words that are said out loud condemning the violence, rightly so, condemning Hamas's violence against Israeli civilians is not similarly said out loud when it comes to the choice to level a dense civilian population in response that has resulted in the killing of any number of civilians, not to mention the death toll of Palestinian civilians preceding this conflict. And I do have concerns about that asymmetry. I mean, what do you make of reporting that he's behind the scenes acknowledging what so many pro-Palestine advocates are screaming for him to acknowledge out loud?
Again, I think people might bristle at, people might not love the idea that we're sending all this aid. We're sending our warships are headed there. We're going to approve a package of some kind, clearly, and the only say we're going to have over how those funds are spent and how those weapons are used is Biden quietly asking, "Hey, could you maybe not do the civilian? Like, it's our money." Don't we get to?
No,
I mean, I wish we had even more say over it in terms of like not sending it. If they want to buy weapons from us, they can buy them just like anyone else. So this is again kind of an America last standpoint that we're on the hook for helping out people everywhere, but we don't get any say in how our support is used. Even if, again, I think it would be worse for American national security if there. So it's bad to have civilian casualties anyway. Again, which is why I strongly condemn what Hamas has done. Hamas is a terrorist group that has killed hundreds of Israelis, and as a result will now have hundreds or thousands of dead innocent Palestinians as well. Minimizing civilian casualties, very important just as its own good, and also important because it understandably inflames people. It can lend itself toward extremism in response. What we're seeing is cycles of retaliatory violence, and there is retaliatory violence against the United States as well for our role in these kinds of things. If we had more say, if the American people had more say over how American military resources were deployed throughout the world, I think we would be safer as a country. So I am taken aback a little bit at the idea that Biden can only quietly suggest how it's going to be used. No, it's our stuff. We do get to say how it's used.
I mean, also, I do think that there's the moral implications of it. If you want your condemnation of the killing of civilians to have moral weight, as it should, when it comes to Israeli civilians, how can you be looked at credibly as a world leader, as a moral compass, when you are clearly unwilling to condemn the killing of civilians when it's politically inconvenient for you because of your geopolitical relationship with another country that you are your allies with? And we say this all the time. We say, well, you can't deal with Saudi Arabia because of humanitarian issues in the country, and then you turn around and you say on the campaign trail Biden did that he's going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah, and then you turn around and you're groveling for oil contracts because of the pandemic. You condemn wrongdoings all over the world, but you turn a blind eye when it's your ally. And I do think that Israel and their behavior specifically toward Palestinians has been an awkward sore spot for American hypocrisy when it comes to its standing as a humanitarian leader in the country. When you look at the map of who acknowledges Palestine as a state, it's basically everybody but us and our European allies. And it does really put into context what a minority position the United States is in here. And the other part of what you were saying is, it's not just for me about whether or not we should have a say in how our dollars are spent overseas. I think because of the perception, whatever geopolitical relationship we have with Israel in terms of being able to store our weapons there, the only democracy in the Middle East, having a foothold there for U.S. military endeavors, it enables, the reason he can't speak to the humanitarian crimes against Palestinians is because there's obviously a direct relationship between our funding and the enabling of those crimes. So he almost cannot admit it because it would implicate the United States in those humanitarian crimes. And so here we are. And it's a very troubling place to be in, because it would be nice. I don't believe in the idea of America as the world's policeman or America as the world's moral authority. I think it's laughable. But to the extent that there's any value in somebody offering moral guidance at a time like this, it absolutely cannot be a president who is unwilling to speak to the humanitarian crimes that are ongoing in Gaza and that are enabled by American tax dollars. A top Israeli defense official is also facing backlash after he told media, quote, Gaza will eventually turn into a city of tents. There will be no buildings. MSNBC's Mehdi Hassan tweeted in response, this is an Israel security officer openly threatening war crimes in Gaza. You can't say you care about innocent lives in Israel, but be okay with the taking of innocent lives in Gaza. That's just morally unsustainable.
I mean, yeah, I shouldn't say that, I guess. The deaths of more innocent civilians will not de-escalate this conflict. It will further escalate this conflict. It will cause there will be then more deaths on the other side. Even from a purely strategic standpoint, the terrorist forces on the other side are emboldened when there are, frankly, they want civilian casualties because it justifies their actions. It's good for recruiting. So it's not even if you're only thinking from a strategic standpoint, that should not be. This kind of rhetoric is not helpful. It's not helpful on either side, as I've said throughout the last 3 days.
On both sides, I would say, like, both Hamas and Israel's right-wing government are benefiting from terrorism.
Well,
like,
we discussed how Israel's government, the actions they've taken to contribute to
the rise of
Hamas's rise.
And then vice versa. So it's a terrible cycle. It's worth noting, maybe we can pull up this clip in a different segment, but Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone was in a position as a reporter to ask some questions of a State Department official. I think that just happened yesterday. But he asked him specifically what our government's response was to the killing of masses of Palestinian civilians, including Palestinian children this week, and the language about human animals and how Israel was going to unleash a quote siege on Gaza. And his response was that ultimately Hamas bears the responsibility. And I do think that's part of what's happening here. The framing is that our government doesn't have to acknowledge any of the wrongdoing of Israel because everything that happens after the Hamas attack is wrapped into, well, Hamas started it. And therefore, Israel apparently has carte blanche to turn Gaza into a tent city. These are explicit statements that are being made by Israeli officials. Right. Well, but
similarly to why I objected so strongly yesterday to the statement by Harvard students and other groups putting it all on the Israeli government. No, you're responsible. If you start indiscriminately killing civilians, that's on you, brother. Nobody made you do that. And that's true on both sides. So no, like Hamas is responsible for the innocent lives they've taken, and then similarly, the Israeli military will be responsible for the innocent lives lost on both sides, and that's both a moral stain and a short-sighted strategic move, because there will, again, I said it 1,000 times, and I will continue to say, there will be more retaliatory violence because of this. We want both sides, and I don't know, I haven't talked to the Israeli people, I've not visited the region, I haven't talked to the Palestinians, but I would bet, as with so many other conflicts, there are so many people here who don't hate their neighbors and don't hate the people on the other side and don't want people to die on either side, and nothing fills them with more dread and more fear when they learn that the people on the other side have just been targeted by their extremists, because they know what's going to happen next. They know the bombs are next going to fall on them, and they don't want that, and it would just be And if the U.S. is going to do anything, I agree with you. It should be incumbent on us to call out indiscriminate slaughter and not fund it further or not fund it at all. The American people don't want to fund it anyway, so we shouldn't.
Well, Robby, it seems like you and I just saw a piece of them.
Well, there's a lot of time left in the show today. We'll see where we end up.
All right, stick around. More Rising coming up.